That's Marco D'Amico. Follow him at MN D'Amico with RG Media as we cover the NHL draft. BetOnline.ag, proud sponsor of the show. You can support us by supporting our sponsors with the best cash out options in the business and wagering possibilities on everything from politics to celebrities to future bets on the Stanley Cup. And of course, with golf season now on in full effect and the PGA Championship now being settled, you've got the other two major championships and all the odds at betonline.ag, trusted space in the online gaming community for almost 30 years. Let's get into some offer sheets. We've been pouring over the details as it relates to trades, as it relates to drafts, mock drafts, targets in the draft. We've been hearing for a while, and general managers have been very vocal about the possibility with the salary cap on the rise. Now, understand this. Marco's been telling us for months about the salary cap, where it's going to go next year and the years to come. But here's the magic. Every team has an internal salary cap. Not every team is a Fat Cat, Leafs, Habs, Rangers. Some teams are the paupers of the NHL, and they have internal salary caps. Now, you need to get to the floor, and if you go above the ceiling, there's a luxury tax to be paid for that. So when it comes to, or it's a hard cap league, obviously, but when it comes to offer sheets, is there a team today that you look at that the Montreal Canadiens can kind of schoolyard bully, push around, and actually go from talking about offer sheets to doing an offer sheet that works this time?
Yeah, so I know a lot of fans have been asking about potentially offer sheeting a guy like Mason McTavish. That's not going to happen. The Anaheim Ducks have like $40 million. In fact, they need to spend money. So you have a guy like Mason McTavish, they're going to lock that guy up 6, 7, 8 years. Yeah. The Montreal Canadiens would need to, it would have to be stupid money. You'd have to offer him like $10 million, which makes no sense. Like, that's just doing stuff to do it. It would cost you 2 firsts, a second, and a third, which is, I guess, but I mean, all like,
plus
that's
the
2 set. Yeah. But the acquisition cost actually isn't that bad.
Right.
But then you have to pay him $10 million. Right. And what happens if he's just a 60-point center? Even if he's playing with a guy like Demidov, right? Like, you don't really know. And what if that's not enough to not make you miss the playoffs next year? And then you offer we just saw 2 teams go from, 11 and 14 to number 1 and number 4 in the draft lottery. What happens if that happens again next year? Because those offer sheet picks are unprotected. So you need to be sure of your shot. So this is why I always say, I think the Canadiens would only do an offer sheet if they've already settled up some other part of their lineup through trade. My 2 cents. So for example, if they get a second line center through trade, like say they trade, top prospect, first round pick, roster player, and they go and get a second line center, and they get to July 1st, the team I think they're going to be looking to bully is the New York Rangers.
Right.
And there's so many reasons why that would happen.
Yeah, I bet.
But the first is the animosity between the two. Those 2 teams, unless Jeff Gordon put a gun to Chris Drury's head, I don't think it's happening. But offer sheet, the New York Rangers have $8 million in cap space, even with the cap going up next season.
Right.
They have to sign Condre Miller and Will Cooley to new contracts. There's no way those 2 sign for a combined $8 million. So they're going to have to try to move somebody out. The guy they've been trying to move out is Chris Kreider, but he's got a no trade clause. And honestly, I don't see anybody helping out the Rangers unless they're getting another piece back with that, right? So
correct. 34-year-old Chris Kreider. No one's doing them any favors.
Correct. Yeah. So why would you want to get stuck with that contract? A, but B, and this is the key thing. If you look at the Rangers depth chart, the left side of the defense, first of all, keep in mind, Condre Miller is injured and won't be ready until the very start of the season. So he's already going to have to hit the ground running without any preseason action, and he's going to have to start the regular season. And we don't even know. There's a chance that he may not be ready for the opening game.
Sure.
So you then look at who's left on that lineup. It's not pretty. their defense is exposed if
Yeah.
Condre Miller is out, right?
Ooh,
And next year's the
Carson
centennial
Soucy steps
season.
up.
Pardon me?
Carson Soucy steps up to play the
Yeah,
left side there.
I don't necessarily see that going down, but like the idea is you need to improve that. So via trade is one thing, but if they already need to acquire another player to make that happen, then they're going to have to find some way to work it out. But if they get to July 1st and those players aren't signed, I could see teams trying to do the exact same thing that happened to Edmonton to them here and now. And the way that would happen, and I like this is the poetic justice of it, is signing a guy like Will Cooley.
Yeah.
You can go two ways. You can do the Kotkaniemi route where you sign him to, higher money 1 year, right? Because an offer sheet is based on the value at a maximum of 5 years. If you offer sheet a player 6 or 7 years, then it actually ends up costing you like the payout that you would have to bid, the picks, the threshold drops, not in your favor, right? Because it's the total value of the contract over a 5-year period. If you go 6 or 7, so say $5 million, 6 years is 30 million. But in actual fact, the payout would be 6 million because they cap it at 5.
Okay.
Right. Even though it's a 6-year. So they take the whole value, but they divide it by 5. So if you were to give Will Cooley 1 year, $6.3 million, that would end up costing you, if I'm not mistaken, a first and a third at $6.5 million. A first
Getting
and a third.
23-year-old forward.
That almost hit 50 points, right?
Yes.
And he's bruising. He's looking good for Team Canada. But the thing is, can the Rangers match that and then still fill out the rest of the roster?
Well, let me ask you this, because Artemi Panarin's going into a contract year. He's next season will be the last year of his $11.5 million deal. How much of that factors into what the New York Rangers are likely to do? Like they're not going to tear it down. They're going to try to retool on the fly and get back to where they were 2 seasons ago, right? So Artemi Panarin is part of the now and part of the future.
I would be shocked. Well, now obviously with what happened, we'll see what happens. But I would be shocked personally that they would just get rid of Panarin in their centennial season.
Well,
right?
Exactly. That's what I think makes your argument, your take, so money, because they're not going to let him go for nothing. It's like you just said, milestone year. And can New York have it all? And I don't think they can. I don't.
No. And they backed themselves into their corner, in my honest opinion, when they went and signed Lafreniere to that contract.
Yeah.
Right. I think, they saw some pretty good production and they jumped on it a little bit like the Canadiens with Slafkovsky. But the difference is like Slafkovsky brings other elements. Right. And in the playoffs, actually, like it looked really good. Lafreniere did look good 2 years ago. And I think that's what, really fed into to giving him that contract. But now the thing is you have Panarin at 11.6. Mika Zibanejad, full no movement clause, 8.5 million. JT Miller, who they just acquired, no movement clause as well.
No move clause.
8 mil. Yep. Chris Kreider, no trade clause, 6.5. Vincent Trocheck, absolute stud of a deal, 5.6 million. And then you have Lafreniere at 7.45.
Yeah.
And then it's just guys making minimum wage. All right, because that's all they could afford. And then on defense for next season, they have Adam Fox, Carson Soucy, William Borgen, and Braden Schneider with Urho Vekanainen.
Yeah.
There is one top 4 left shot defenseman on that team, and he's not even signed for next year. You cannot run it back with that same defense.
Wild.
The right side of their defense looks good. I could see them potentially dangling a guy like Braden Schneider to try and see if they can bring in some help at forward. Yeah. Maybe get a left shot D instead. But man, the Rangers are in tight, very, very tight situation. So if I'm the Montreal Canadiens and you want to get bigger on the wings and you focus your efforts potentially at improving at center and right shot defense through the draft, that's a guy I would look at. But again, I state this again. You could threaten an offer sheet to then potentially get you to a trade.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
So the Canadiens could try to say, listen, we'll give you 16th overall and a 3rd round pick and another asset instead of going the offer sheet route. Because if I'm the Montreal Canadiens, it's still too early to do an offer sheet unless they've truly improved the roster, right? Like, how would you feel, Shaun?
What do you think the order is? Obviously the draft, but then is it explore trade? If trade doesn't work, then offer sheet steps up, or
yeah. So I can give you an example, right? So like if you get to a point where you're at the draft, still unsigned, you're speaking to the agent's not sure they're going to be able to get something done, player wants out, or player would like to get paid, no, it's not going to, the opportunity's not going to come in New York. They just signed Lafreniere. Like, where does that leave you? You're going to be perpetually stuck on that 3rd line. And then, you start having a conversation with Montreal and you're like, would you consider it? Maybe. Montreal turns around and goes to the Rangers, and some people will say that's tampering. It's engaging with agents is not tampering. Telling them to come is tampering. So what ends up happening is you end up going to the New York Rangers and you say, listen, he doesn't want to play for you. We know it. You know it. We would like to send you an offer sheet in June, which I believe would suck. Yeah. Let's try to work out a deal now so that we can get you assets now, and then you can use those assets to maybe improve your team elsewhere. Let's just make a deal. I don't think that's going to happen because the two sides don't really like each other, but that would be how it would work at the draft, around the draft, to avoid getting caught in offer sheet land. But then if they decide to play hardball, you can negotiate still between now and then and try to trade like, for example, a 2026 top 10 protected pick, for example, right? If the draft already happens and you end up picking instead. But if you get to a point where you have to give an offer sheet, like I said at the top of the hour, you really have to make sure that the roster is improved to the point where you're not putting yourself at risk of giving them a very good pick, because we've seen it in the past where teams traded picks way in advance. I'm looking at you, Ottawa. I'm looking at you, Colorado, and I'm definitely looking at you, Boston. Sorry, not Boston, Toronto, where you or San Jose, where you give a team that 1st round pick and then poof ends up being a top 5 pick. You don't want to be that team because then that haunts you forever. So the way that I see it is you have to make sure that roster is improved. So you look at a team like them, definitely an offer sheet candidate. Not necessarily for the Montreal Canadiens, this next team, but watch out for the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah. The Edmonton Oilers
go after
prime.
True.
Prime situation.
Think they're going to go after Matt Rempe? I'm kidding.
No, but a guy like Bouchard, Evan Bouchard,
yes,
being unsigned, be careful with that one. That's a team that could potentially line up the offer sheet and get stuck because they're going to need to save that money for McDavid the summer after.
Do you think it's going to be a Wild West summer here? Not just, I'm just talking in general.
I think you're going to see a lot of threats for offer sheet, but I think there's too many teams in the middle of the standings right now that unless they significantly improve their roster before doing an offer sheet, would find it too risky to do so.
Yeah.
What I would like to see and what I think would be really cool is to sign some of these younger guys, these middle guys, like, for example, a Maverick Bourque in Dallas, signing him to a $2 million contract because Dallas cannot afford to pay him $2 to $2.5 million. And that only ends up costing you like a 2nd or a 3rd or a 2nd round pick. That's a worthwhile endeavor, in my opinion, especially if you're the Montreal Canadiens, who have 2 2nd round picks already for next season. Like, that could make sense. I'm not saying they're going to do it. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the guy they'd have to go and get, but
right.
That cost acquisition, he's worth more than a 2nd right now. Like, elite AHL player that's just looking for a shot in the NHL, like that kind of a guy. So it's not necessarily the star players. Like, everyone's gonna be like, let's offer shoot Matthew Nyes. That does make sense. Absolutely makes sense. Would be a great target. The entire league is going to be looking at it. And one of the last
and what's it going to cost you? Is it going to be a $9.5 million player? This guy.
Well, a $9.2 million offer sheet is a 1st, a 2nd, and a 3rd over 5 years.
I would do it for Matthew Nyes.
Everybody would do it, right? But the only way Toronto's going to get into that hole is if they sign Marner and then sign Tavares. I think.
Yeah, I don't see both happening. I don't. We'll see. I mean, it's hard to guess that.
It could if they decide to move out other pieces, right? Like a Kampf, Definitely a guy that they can move out, especially when you have Max Domi in the lineup. You could,
Yeah.
your three centers are there. There's a couple of guys on the Leafs that could be expendable. If you look at the way that they play, Yarncroke is another one that could be expendable, especially when you have an Easton Cowan joining the roster next year. So Toronto can play. Toronto can definitely play. But if a team gets aggressive and offers Nyes like 10 mil,
Yeah.
two firsts, a second, and a third, some teams may find that still worth it. And Toronto at that point cannot play ball.
Maybe you're right. They got Scott Lawton. He's got 1 year left on his deal, right?
Well, they're not going to move Lawton. That's a sweetheart deal. But they have $26.8 million.
Interesting to see.
I think so. But the one thing I will remind everybody, when you can offer sheet multiple players at once, only if the picks used to try and get them, and they have to be your picks. Yes, you cannot offer sheet two players at $9 million. But you can definitely do what, for example, St. Louis did and offer sheet one guy like Holloway, who ended up costing you a third, and then offer sheet a guy like Broberg, who ended up costing you a second, because it's separate picks. But if you offer sheet a guy for a first and a third at 9.2 mil, the only thing you can do after that is offer sheet a guy for a second round pick if you want to do two things at once.
Correct. Yeah, you can't offer sheet with imaginary picks or possible picks.
Once you do an offer sheet and it's fine, your salary and the picks are locked in. They belong to the other team provisionally. So you can't then turn around and do something else. It's locked in. You got to wait for that to fall through before you can do something else.
Not surprising. I've met a few NHL capologists in my time, and they're generally some of the smartest people I've been around. And when I listen to you break it down, I have a clearer understanding of why these capologists are pretty smart individuals. Marco D'Amico at MN D'Amico online and through RG Media, in season, off season, all season. Marco, great stuff as always. I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being a loyal supporter. Like, subscribe, support us by supporting our sponsors at betonline.ag, a trusted space in the online gaming community for the better part of 30 years. Marco, thank you so much, and looking forward to what's on tap when we reconvene in a week's time with a whole new batch of stuff, because there is no off season. Marco, thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure, guys. Enjoy.